Let's switch to the upcoming series. The Mets take on the 22-16 Chicago Cubs. The next 3 games, they'll see an old friend and former first-round pick, Pete Crow-Armstrong, who the Mets traded for Javy Baez in 2021. PCA has an 837 OPS, 9 homers, 12 stolen bases with 6 defensive runs saved so far this season. June, have trades like that made teams more hesitant to give up top prospects for one-year rentals? What do you think? We did just talk about kind of the tide turning there with people kind of putting a lot more value on like projections. What do you think?
It's an interesting question because I think when you go back to when the Mets got Javy Baez, the fans really wanted the Mets to get someone like Javy Baez. So it's easy to look back now, knowing how big of a disaster the whole Javy Baez situation was in New York, to be like, damn, we traded Pete Crow-Armstrong and we got Javy Baez in return. Like at the time, that was not how the trade was received by Mets fans and people across baseball. That being said, I do think that the way that you value prospects shifting has kind of changed the dynamics. I think that, when you're trading for a rental, you probably are aiming for, Javy Baez was at one point one of the best second basemen in baseball. He wasn't quite that when the Mets trade for him, deadlines ago. I think that the bar to give up a top prospect, a first round pick like Pete Crow-Armstrong, is probably a little bit higher now than it was before, especially because teams are willing to just let guys succeed or even flail at the major league level at a younger age. And so I think that kind of scale and balance has shifted a little bit more towards like keeping prospects and hoarding prospects almost. But we're going to start to see a wave of teams, I think, sign these young players to contracts extensions before they even accomplish anything. Like I remember like Jonathan Singleton with the Astros, like that's kind of the first wave of that happening when he had not played a game in the major leagues. I think he signed a $60 or $70 million a year contract. My numbers might be off there, but it was a pretty substantive deal for someone who had never played a game in the major leagues. And for a variety of reasons, his career got completely derailed. But we're starting to see this trend now where teams are signing young players who just got up to the major leagues to these contract extensions. And I mean, you saw this with the Red Sox and Christian Campbell. There's a lot of other examples across Major League Baseball right now. A bunch of those contracts aren't going to work out. And, $60-70 million to a 19, 20-year-old, it's not the biggest risk in the world for these teams, especially a team like the Mets who are willing to give out $500 million for Juan Soto. And so the risk value proposition is kind of still there. But I do wonder in the next few years, we're going to start to see teams sign these young players to contracts because they come up earlier, because they view it as an opportunity to get ahead of the market and sign them for below market value for what they might get on the free agent market down the road. Yeah. And some of those contracts aren't going to work out. And so I think that there is going to be a recalibration at some point, as there always is in baseball. But I think that right now, when you look back at the Javy Baez trade, it's important to recontextualize how much Mets fans wanted someone like Javy Baez on the team back in the day, and how much I think the way that teams value prospects and now give prospects opportunities to play at younger ages in the majors have kind of shifted the way that we look at that trade in retrospect.
No, for sure. But June, when does it actually make sense for a team to go all in trading top prospects for a rental player or on a rental player? When do you think that actually does make sense?
When you think you can win a World Series and you think you're really close and you need that one guy. Like I remember when the Chicago Cubs went all in and traded for Aroldis Chapman from the Yankees. And he was there for basically half a season and went back to the Yankees immediately afterwards. But Chapman was completely worth it for that team. And they won their first, they broke with the curse of the Billy Goat. So it was totally worth it. And, it's easy to look back at these trades when you go all in and be like, well, they didn't win, so it wasn't worth it. Well, you got to look at it in the moment and be like, well, how good of a chance did they actually have to win in that moment? I think if you really think that you have a chance to win the series in baseball, that threshold is lower than it is in a sport like the NBA, where, it feels like 3 or 4 teams go into the postseason actually having a chance to win the title. And it tends to be those teams. In baseball, if you make it into the playoffs, if you're a wild card team, if you're, the team with the best record in baseball, the team with the best record in baseball doesn't often even win the World Series, let alone make it to the World Series. And so I think that is a little bit more tempting in a baseball. The risk is worth it a lot more because the threshold to feel like you're in it, to actually have a chance to win the World Series, is much higher. And so that for me is like, you got a chance to win it, you should go all in. Because when GMs get a little hesitant around making these bold decisions, it's when it tends to lead to teams never actually making it over that hump. And so I would rather be in a position as a GM, if you have a chance to make it and you feel like you're getting a player back to go, because you never know when you're going to get that chance again. You never know what's going to happen with injuries. You never know how guys might fall off the cliff as they age. And so I think that when you can smell it, even if you're, a decent wild card team, it is worth going for it.